And welcome back, Rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and we have just got the announcement yesterday for the 2025 USA Eagles 32-man roster, and it was a huge announcement, courtesy of the Rugby Network. Will Hooley and Alex Corbicero were hosting. They were able to talk to head coach Steve Lawrence about the announcement and a little bit of some interesting tidbits about the roster. Some interesting names were picked. I'll admit to it. Some of them a little controversial. Some names that were omitted off of the list. Again, a little controversial. A couple names. I think there's some reason behind it that hasn't been really developed yet. But this channel is not about rumors or innuendos or anything. It's really about facts. So won't really talk too much about that, but definitely we'll talk about some of the names that made it and didn't make it, as well as a couple of names that even diehard USA Eagles fans may not be too familiar with, so I'll give a little 411 on those names. But let's deep dive in the 2025 USA Eagles announcement and kind of go over the roster. And of course, as you see here, we also have the Summer of Rugby schedule that is coming up. We have 3 test matches here in the United States. Of course, we'll go over those at the end of the video, as well as we'll be preparing for the Pacific Nations Cup later on in the fall, which is super important for the USA because that is that's the beginning of the qualification process for the 2027 Rugby World Cup, which we kind of really need to qualify for, especially to prepare ourselves for our USA hosted 2031 Rugby World Cup. So let's go over the names right now, and this is the 32-man roster. So basically these are the boys that will be traveling to these places, at least for these places for now. They'll be practicing with the team. As soon as Major League Rugby Championship game is done, they are going to get all together. Some of them, from what I understand, are already heading over to Colorado to prepare, while the rest that are part of squads that are in the playoff games, the championship game, of course, they're going to be busy. But there are quite a few players that are getting ready already to play and get themselves acclimated to each other. But those will be the 32 men that Scott Lawrence, head coach Scott Lawrence, will then form his 15 and 23-man roster that will be playing out of those. Now, of course, there is a non-traveling reserve roster as well, which we'll talk about. That was not announced during the conversation with Hooley and Corbicero. And of course, that does kind of lead a little bit more insight on why certain names were omitted. And then, of course, there was also revealed by USA Rugby an injury or non-committed roster. And we'll talk a little bit about that because, again, that also kind of explains why certain names were omitted. But here is our 32-man roster. And we'll go a little bit into the details on caps and everything because, unfortunately, with this printout, they did not mention the caps that all these players were with. It is a rather young roster, I'll admit to you, and I'll drop some of the numbers in just a second. But let's go through it. First, you have your props, Ezekiel Lindenmuth from Houston. This will be, if he comes in, he will get his very first cap. Jack Escaro from Old Glory, DC, 13 caps. Pono Davis from Houston Sabercats, 5 caps. And Peyton Talea from San Diego, he only has 1 cap, looking for his second one. And then another young guy that just made the roster, Tonga Kofi from Utah Warriors, who's had a really great end of the 2025 season. He is looking for his very first cap. Caleb Geiger, a name that most USA Eagles fans know from Old Glory. He is kind of a hybrid hooker and prop with 3 caps. Another hooker who's also a well-known name for the U.S. Eagles, Capelli Pafaletti, one of the few non-Major League Rugby players currently. He is from Province Rugby in Europe. And then Shiloh Klein from San Diego, 2 caps under his belt. Going into the lock, Sam Gala from Anthem, 7 caps. Good to see his name on the roster. Young, talented, future USA Eagles superstar. Tavita Nakali, another guy who has not yet made a appearance for the USA Eagles yet from Old Glory. Another one, Marnio, who I've heard his nickname is War Machine. Ritalingis from Houston, he also has not yet had a cap. And then rounding out the locks, Villani Halu from San Diego, 14 caps for him. Going with the flankers. Now, this is a guy that I'm very, very glad to see finally get a call up to possibly make his first USA cap. Christian Prince Poidevin. Great player, lot of talent. Was an LA Guillotines member. That's how I got to know him. Now with the San Diego Legion, had a phenomenal 2025 season. Corey Daniel from Old Glory, 10 caps under him. Jameson Fontanaro Schultz, another guy who's he is at lock, though I know he can also play number 8, 13 caps. And then another guy who could possibly get his first cap, Makin Ali Khan from the Anthem Rugby Carolina. And then the number 8's Benjamin Bonasso, very talented young player, 9 caps. And Thomas Caceres, who also another talented player from the Miami Sharks, both Bonasso and Caceres, he has 3 caps under his name. Now, we go to the scrum halves, and no surprise to see these two names. J.P. Smith from Seattle, 6 caps under his belt. He hasn't been with the Eagles for at least a couple years, so it's good to see him back. And then Ruben De Haas, talented player from NOLA, 36 caps right there. The fly halves, this one's where it gets a little interesting. Of course, we'll always have A.J. McGinty, one of the best USA Eagles players. Unfortunately, he does not play for Major League Rugby. He's with the Bristol Bears, who he's had a phenomenal European career. He has 40 caps here with the USA Eagles. And then behind him, these are some interesting pickups. Chris Hislenbeck, who has been phenomenal for the Chicago Hounds. If you saw my review of the playoffs with Major League Rugby, Chris Hislenbeck has been a guy who's one of the main reasons why the Chicago Hounds has had a successful year. It's great to see that his name has been called up. He will possibly make his USA Eagles debut. And then here's a guy that most USA Eagles fans do not know, Thomas Pittman. He is a fly half and can also play center. One of the reasons why head coach Scott Lawrence decided to have him because of the versatility. But let's talk a little bit more about Thomas Pittman. He does not play for Major League Rugby. He's never played in America. He actually plays in France right now for Chartres Rugby. He's played most of his career in Europe. So the thing is this. He actually has USA roots through his Irish grandfather. His grandfather was an Irish player, John Hewitt, was a hooker for Ireland, capped a couple of times. But Thomas Pittman, but his grandfather, John Hewitt, was born in Massachusetts, and that's where Thomas Pittman gets at least some American qualification, because through the standards and guidelines, if you at least have blood through a grandparent, even though you weren't born in that country, if your grandparent was, you can play in that country as a national player, and that's where Thomas Pittman has American blood. Now, Thomas Pittman, like I said, because of his versatility to play both fly half and center, he also has a phenomenal 88% kicking accuracy off of the tee. Supposedly, from what I understand, he's been playing a couple years in Europe. Back in 2021, last year, he played 21 games, started 20 of them, and scored 260 points. He is one of the top point scorers. Now, granted, he doesn't play for the top league in Europe, which is the Premiership. He's a little bit below, but the talent is there, and that's where head coach Scott Lawrence identified, and that's why he's given Thomas Pittman the chance to play and possibly get his first USA cap. A lot gambling on the very young Chris Hisselbeck and the very young Thomas Pittman behind the very experienced A.J. McGinty. Now, let's get into our backs. First of all, starting with the very talented, another young talented player, Don Bissag, still playing in college, St. Mary's College, California. Center, 9 caps under his belt. Eric Storty, who is our overall #1 draft pick in the 2024 MLR draft for Anthem Rugby Carolina. He had a little shaky of a year this year, a little bit of injuries, but enough to at least get the nod to start. And then Tavita Lopetti, very, very talented winger. San Diego Legion, 20 caps. And then Lauina Futi for Seattle, who, even though he's had quite a quiet career, he just lit it up in this playoff game, which unfortunately Seattle did not win. But Inafuti is a very, very talented and fast winger, 3 caps under his belt. And then you're bringing in now the experienced center, Nate Osberger from Chicago. He has the most caps out of any of these players with 49. He is missing just 1 for that 50th, which obviously I feel as long as he can suit up, he will get in these next couple games. And then on the flip side, his Chicago counterpart Noah Brown, who only has 1 cap as a USA Eagle, but it should be noted that Noah Brown was the 4th overall pick in the 2023 MLR draft. And then rounding out the centers, Rufus McLean from Houston, who has yet to get a USA Eagles cap. And then you have your fullbacks, Mitchie Wilson from Anthem with 13 caps, and Toby Fricker from Anthem with 2 caps. So, with that being said, first of all, the Major League Rugby representation, of course, is great here. Out of the 32 players, 27 of them are currently on Major League Rugby teams. It should be interesting to note that Anthem, Old Glory, and San Diego actually tied for 5 each. They have the most representative of any squad. All squads are represented except for one. Unfortunately, RFCLA does not have a representative on the 32 main roster. There are a couple in the non-traveling reserve roster, which I'll, of course, get into in just a second. But as I mentioned before, this is a very, very young squad. Out of all 32 members, for those members that have 10 or less caps under their belt, 22 of them, 22 out of the 32 have 10 or less caps. A very, very inexperienced team. As I mentioned before, the most experienced players are Nate Osberger with 49, AJ McGinty with 40, and then it drops precipitously from there. So a very, very young squad. And then 9 of those 22, as I mentioned before, they are possibly debutantes. So it's a very, very young squad. Kind of interesting, the development of here. When they were speaking with head coach Lawrence about this, he mentioned that a lot of it had to do with play style. They were looking throughout the Major League Rugby season on players that could be very aggressive. They're looking for a very aggressive, explosive style of play, and this was the roster they felt had it. Also, too, some of the players that they did not pick, like aforementioned Ethan McVeigh, who I think is a phenomenal player, is just because they just didn't play enough in this year of Major League Rugby. So also what really accounted for a lot of these players getting picked is how much they did this season. Because as we know, we don't have a lot of turnaround time from the end of the championship game. It is literally 1 week and USA is playing against Belgium. Granted, it's Belgium, but still, not a lot of turnaround. So you're asking for players to have already had at least a good portion of the year with rugby under their belt. And so that's where a lot of these players were picked, because a lot of them were playing a lot in the season. So players that weren't playing that much, unfortunately, even though they may be more experienced, got looked over in comparison. So with that being said, I would like to show the reserve non-traveling roster. Now what this is, out of the 32 that are playing or that were picked for the main roster, if anybody gets hurt for whatever reason, you are allowed to replace them as long as there's a couple of days leeway, I believe, before the actual game itself. Like, you can't make that sudden change the day before. You have to do it in a couple of days to give the other side heads up that you're going to be changing in players. So this pool of players are the reserve players that could possibly be called up and changed. And even head coach Scott Lawrence mentioned this too. I think this roster of 32 are going to be the initial 32 that will play the first 3 games. We could be looking at a completely different, not a completely different, but some changes, calls up from this reserve list when we go into the Pacific Nations Cup. So these are the names, and it also kind of makes sense of why some names were omitted. And I'll go into that a little bit more as we go through these names. So starting in alphabetical order, we have Alec McDonald from Miami, Brandon Harvey from San Diego, Christian Dyer, very talented winger from RCLA, Connor Buckley. Connor Buckley, a name that a lot of people are wondering why he did not make the list. Again, I feel it's possibly because he didn't get to play that much this year for Old Glory. Corbin Smith from Ansem, Dom Makina, another name. That one a little bit interesting. Dom Makina's been having actually a pretty good year for Houston. Kind of interesting that he got looked over. Emmanuel Alba III from Houston as well. Ethan McVeigh, as I mentioned before, from Old Glory. Very talented scrum half. Unfortunately, didn't play that much this year. Angus McClellan from Utah. Julian Roberts from NOLA. Talented player. I just think very, very young, but has the chance to possibly suit up if unfortunately there's too many injuries. Another talented young player, Junior Nafa from Anthem, Carolina. Kenny Nesagege from Houston. Luke White from Chicago. And Luke Carty from NOLA. I think Luke Carty's name would have been on this list, but unfortunately Luke Carty had a pretty much up and down season with MLR, with the NOLA Gold, and NOLA really did not have a very good year overall, so I think that's why his name was omitted from the final roster. Malachi Isdale, a guy who, again, he's just a couple years of Major League Rugby away from being an Eagle because he is that talented. And Malinu Nuofe from RCLA, very talented young Samoan American player. Speaking as an RCLA fan and working with the team and talking to a lot of players, veteran players, Matt Heaton, Andrew Coe, Reese McDonald, they love Maliu Nuafe. They really feel he is a future star in the making. So he is a guy to watch out for. Didn't make the 32-man roster, but there's a chance in the future you might hear more of him as an Eagles. Mark O'Keefe, an experienced player who, unfortunately, I think he's been dealing with injury, so he didn't get to do much in Chicago, so he doesn't make the list. Matt Schumacher, another talented young player. Michael Baska did not play at all, really, for Chicago, so, you know, obviously, he makes the reserve list, but not enough to make the main roster. Michael Grandy from Anthem. Mikey Sosanefiagi, another talented USA Eagles player for RCLA. Nate Sylvia from San Diego. Peyton Wall, who is a short list runner for the Rookie of the Year. Phenomenal player for Chicago. Obviously, just a little too young. Even Coach Scott Lawrence was laughing because I think it was Will Hooley that wanted Peyton Wall to be on the roster, but Scott Lawrence's reaction was, he's only played like 6 games. Like, 6 professional games. How can you have him start as an Eagle? So yeah, just the fact that he's in the running. And I think some of these reserve players do get to train with the team, so maybe some of the youngsters get a little bit of experience. Hey, it's a start to possibly seeing these guys suit up for the 27 Rugby World Cup, possibly the 31 one as well. Rand Santos from California, Cal Berkeley, phenomenal young player. He is just you know, he hasn't done much this year. He doesn't play for Major League Rugby, still in college, so not a lot to say about him. Ryan James, RJ, another talented player. I'm kind of surprised he didn't get picked up because granted, I think the first half of the year was really good for RJ, and then, of course, San Diego really struggled all season, so Ryan James probably, his star kind of dimmered a little bit with that. Sean McNulty from Miami. Stephen Crimp, another phenomenal young talent, had to step up for San Diego because they just were not having any luck with the kicking tee, and Stephen Crimp really stepped up, so great to see his name on the reserve list. And then Tommaso Boni, very talented young player for Old Glory, but again, he also, I feel, was dealing with some injuries, so he did not make the starting 32-man roster. And then we have the last one, injuries. So for some of the names that were omitted, this is the injury and also unavailable. Now, unavailable is kind of a loose term. Head coach Scott Lawrence didn't really go into details of what that really meant. I feel for some of these players, it just kind of means they are, at least for right now, no longer doing international competition. It is a brutal schedule for some of these players. I joked with Matt Heaton when we were at the watch party just recently that rugby is such a game that if you're a fan of rugby, it's great because literally rugby is year-round. You can watch some form of rugby every month of the year. There is no off-season technically. You can watch 15s and you can go to 7s. You go to 7s to 10s. You can then go back to 15s. You can go back to 7s. Literally, anytime that there's a day, there's rugby of some form you can watch. technically that means as a player, you can also be playing rugby year-round as well. After a while, some players don't want to do that. So after a grueling year of Major League Rugby, to have to then deal with international travel when all you really want to do is just go home and spend time with your family, some people just don't want to do that. So it is possible that some of these players, that's kind of their way of saying, yeah, we don't want to do it anymore, which is fine because a lot of them, yeah, they've already done a lot, and hey, it's completely understandable. It's their choice. But on this list, some of these though are hurt. Jake Turnbull, Big Joey Tufwete from NOLA, I don't know what their status injury-wise, but Alex Mahan definitely has been struggling with some injuries from Anthem. Nafi Maofu is from Blarete, which is in France. And Renger van Erten, also from France, for Salle Brive Football Club. I don't know really what their status is. I think they just have to they're dealing with international rugby on their end. Jason Dom, I believe I know the reason why he is not participating this year. I don't want to disclose that because he hasn't really disclosed it. But it's not injury related, but there is a reason he is unavailable. CC Mahoney from Seattle, I think he's hurt because I don't think he played at all for Major League Rugby. Paddy Ryan for sure is hurt. Rickard Hadding, I believe Mika Kruse is definitely hurt. And then Connor Mooneyham has been struggling with injuries all year with Anthem, unfortunately. So again, a lot of these players, it's just the reason why they were omitted were because they were hurt. So that is the roster again. I'll be honest with you, I was surprised with the picks. Not so surprised once I saw who made the reserve and who was on the injury list because it kind of made sense. I feel that head coach Scott Lawrence really did pick a list of names that he felt were the best that he can use with what he's got. Now, is it the best roster that he can use? If everybody was healthy, definitely not. But like I said, with the people that he has available to him, I feel he's picked a very good and competitive roster. Now, it is a little concerning that, like I mentioned, only 10 of the players of the 32 have more than 10 caps. It is a very young roster. They're going to have a big wake-up call when we get to the last game of the three before we go into the Pacific Nations Cup Challenge. But I think by that time, head coach Scott Lawrence will know exactly what he has with what he's playing with the players in his pool. So with that being said, let's go over the Summer of Rugby real quick. Obviously, we'll go into great detail once we have these games coming up. I also might do a couple of watch-alongs, so if everyone's down with that, because I know a lot of people do enjoy these watch-alongs. I enjoy them because it gets a chance for me to watch rugby as well as talk to a lot of the fans that watch it. It's always a lot of fun. With that being said, the games are all going to be on Paramount Plus. Yes, I know it's a pay site. It's not that expensive, though. I just signed up. $7.99 if you just want what's called Paramount Plus exclusive. And then if you want HBO along with it, which has shows like Dexter, I believe, is on it. A lot of Star Trek stuff as well. I'll admit to you, I'm just in it for the rugby. But that's $17.99 a month, which again, not both values are not that expensive, and you can cancel anytime. So if you just want to watch the rugby, watch it for a month, cancel, bring it back when the Pacific Nations Cups happens, because from what I understand, pretty much all of USA Eagles matches from now until whenever are going to be on Paramount Plus. So with that being said, kickoffs for our first game, July 5th, the day after 4th of July. Currently ranked number 15 USA Eagles take it on currently ranked number 22 Belgium. In Charlotte, North Carolina, at the American Legion Stadium, which is the home to Charlotte Anthem, Carolina. That should be a fun game. And then the following weekend, July 12th, is number 16 Spain taking on the USA. Oh, by the way, the Belgium game, very first time USA has ever played Belgium, so that should be fun. A nice little warm-up match for what's become a big feud with Spain. USA has played Spain, I believe, at least 5 straight years now, and they're 2-0 the last 2 times that we've played against them. July 12th, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, again in Charlotte at the American Veterans Stadium. And then the big one, July 19th, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, USA Men's take on the number 6 England Red Roses in Washington, D.C. at Audi Field. That will be a huge game. Obviously, I believe the biggest test for a lot of these young players' career. But it's a good chance to give a lot of these players a chance to play against easily one of the best teams in the world. This, of course, will be a doubleheader with the USA Women's, who will be playing against Fiji on that same day. I believe they're playing earlier in Audi Field. But again, all these games you can watch on Paramount Plus. Again, I will review all these games a little bit more in detail when the games happen. But yeah, that's our review of the announcement. I am super excited. I can't wait to see how this turns out. Again, these matches not as important as the Pacific Nations Cup tournament, which that is all about qualifying for the Rugby World Cup. Of course, I'll go into more details in that when we get to that, but these games are a really good chance to really get the USA Eagles team melded on the same page, synchronized together, and it's just a great chance for fans to watch some great rugby. So again, stick with us here at Rugby411. We'll go all over this as we enter the summer of rugby, and we'll be here for every moment. So again, thank you very much for watching the video, and I'll see you on the pitch.